good evening, America, or morning, or whatever dimension we're living in, where it's perfectly normal to get an Amber Alert, political fundraising text, and a breaking news notification about a mass shooting, all before the coffee finishes brewing. Welcome to the show. Tonight, we're talking about guns, political violence, and this fascinating American tradition we have of claiming liberty while aiming directly at each other's foreheads. It's the founding fathers' favorite pastime, right after owning land, wearing wigs and pretending they understood modern weaponry. We're calling this episode Liberty with a Crosshair because nothing says freedom quite like taking cover behind the produce section at a Kroger. And yes, we're diving into all of it: the history, the culture wars, the lobby money, the intimidation, the ghost guns, the militia cosplay community, militia movements, and of course, how we actually fix this mess without descending into real life Hunger Games reboot sponsored by the NRA. So buckle up, preferably with a seatbelt that isn't considered an infringement on your constitutional rights. Let me say this from the jump. This isn't an anti gun episode. This is an anti bullshit episode. I grew up around guns. I live in Indiana. People here treat shotguns like spare tires. You just assume everyone's got one. This episode is about political violence, about intimidation, about how a country of 330 million people ended up building a democracy where half of us think the other half is about to reenact Red Dawn. So let's start where all disasters begin: history. All right, let's loosen up the joints and get into the history section, because if America has a toxic relationship with guns today, trust me, it has some very interesting X's in the early days. Let's rewind the tape to the late 1700s, before the founding of Indiana, before the AR-15s, before YouTube comment sections where people threatened civil war between bites of Hot Pockets. Back then, militia didn't mean a Facebook group of guys whose tactical training starts and ends with Call of Duty. A militia meant the state's organized defense force. Think National Guard, but wearing wool, complaining about gout. And honestly, almost nobody had a personal arsenal. You might have had one musket if you were lucky, and it fired about as fast as a toddler eats peas, slowly, reluctantly, and usually with something flying in the wrong direction. The founders wrote the Second Amendment to ensure states could defend themselves, not because they envisioned every American citizen owning enough firepower to recreate the Battle of Fallujah in their backyard. For over 2 centuries, courts basically agreed: yes, you can have guns as part of a well regulated militia. That phrase, well regulated, was not optional. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't a vibe. It meant structured, trained, accountable, state run, not my cousin Chet owns night vision goggles, so he's basically Delta Force now. From 1791 up until the 2000s, the federal courts, including the Supreme Court, repeatedly ruled the Second Amendment was a collective right, not an individual one. This wasn't controversial. It wasn't radical. This wasn't some anti gun conspiracy. This was the established legal reality for more than 200 years. In 1903, Congress passed the Militia Act, which formalized the National Guard as the official modern militia. So from that point on, if you wanted to be part of a well regulated militia, you didn't join a Telegram chat. You joined the Guard. That's important because people still quote the Second Amendment like it's a coupon that never expired. But legally, structurally, America's militia system evolved. The amendment stayed the same, but the institution it referred to was updated, like going from AOL dial up to fiber internet. Same concept, different era. Between the 1930s and the 1990s, America actually passed, get this, gun safety laws, real ones. 1934, National Firearms Act, taxes machine guns, sawed-offs, and silencers. 1968, Gun Control Act, because assassinations were happening like it was a damn trend. 1986, machine gun freeze. 1993, Brady background checks. 1994, federal assault weapons ban. And guess what? None of these laws triggered a tyrannical takeover. No one was forced into FEMA camps. America did not collapse into the Soviet gulags. Things got safer. Imagine that. Let's talk about the 1994 assault weapons ban, which, fun fact, was basically the Beyonce of gun policy. Wildly effective, universally recognized, and constantly argued about on the internet. During the ban, mass shooting fatalities dropped. After the ban expired, they skyrocketed, like Elon Musk's Twitter mistakes. But Congress, in its infinite wisdom, said, nah, we're good. Now we arrive at 2008, the year the modern gun debate was basically born. The Supreme Court hands down District of Columbia v. Heller, a 5-4 decision, and it says, surprise, the Second Amendment is now an individual right. This wasn't a small adjustment. This was rewriting the ending of the Constitution like it was a Game of Thrones finale. And Justice Scalia, love him or hate him, did some real legal gymnastics to get there. He invented a brand new reading of the amendment that no court in 200 plus years had ever used. And that was the turning point. That was the moment the NRA went from gun safety organization to a political juggernaut. That was the moment the culture wars snapped into place like a Lego brick of chaos. And from that point forward, everything changed. Now let's talk about the militia movement because, oh boy, after Ruby Ridge and Waco in the 1990s, militia groups exploded. Then they dipped a little. Then the internet came along, and suddenly every guy who failed the push up test in JROTC decided he was a Patriot defender with a YouTube channel and a GoPro. These groups grew again in the late 2000s, then again around 2014, then again around 2020. You know, the usual cycles when America's stress level hits boiling pot, left unattended. And let's be real, most of them are armed, most are untrained, and many believe their constitutional purpose is to fight the government, which, fun twist, is not what the founders intended. I live in Indiana, so let me speak my truth here. Indiana is like a time capsule of American gun culture. We've got rural gun owners who grew up hunting with grandpa. We've got suburban folks who own guns because the news scares them. We've got gun shows so big they have their own gravitational pull. And we've got politicians who act like gun legislation is kryptonite. Indiana is the crossroads of America, and that includes the crossroads where guns and politics smash into each other like a demolition derby. Today, guns are no longer just tools. They're identity markers. They're political jerseys. They're Instagram props. They're culture war badges. We took a tool with a very specific purpose, firing a projectile, and turned it into a personality trait. That's why the debate is so intense. We're no longer discussing laws. We're discussing identities. And people will do a lot to defend the law, but they'll do anything to defend an identity. All right, let's leave the history books and step into the modern era, where guns are lighter, deadlier, easier to buy, easier to build, and apparently easier to lose in an Uber than to regulate. We're talking about right now, the headlines, the tensions, the stuff we are all living through while pretending everything is normal. Let's start with something fun, political intimidation. Yes, nothing says healthy democracy like needing a SWAT team to protect your school board meeting from a guy with an AR-15 and a Facebook account named Liberty Eagle 1776 Patriot Day. In 2023 alone, threats against election workers jumped over 1,000%. Candidates were wearing body armor at campaign events like we were running for office in Gotham City. And if you're thinking, well, at least Indiana isn't that bad, let me introduce you to a little place called Hamilton County, where half the school board meetings look like someone yelled, free tactical gear at the door. You know the story. We have a mass shooting. The news anchors look exhausted. Police on the presser. Politicians release copy and paste tweets, and America collectively shrugs like we're stuck in the world's worst Groundhog Day remake. The US now averages more mass shootings than days in a year. That's not hyperbole. That's math. The kind they banned from the textbooks for being too woke. In Indiana, we've had mass shootings at malls, factories, bars, and schools. We treat it like weather. Oh, it's storm season. Oh, it's mass shooting season. Spoiler, it's always mass shooting season. Those guns, the Build-A-Bear workshop of firearms. For when you want all the destructive power with none of that annoying paperwork that says you're not a danger to society. Law enforcement recovered 30,000 plus ghost guns in 2023. That's up from 2,500 just a few years earlier. That's not a trend, that's a rocket launch. And kids as young as 14 are assembling them because apparently TikTok now has tutorials titled How to Build a Glock 19 in 10 Minutes. No tools. America, we put the DIY and die. Receipt number one, the one that should end all debates but somehow won't. The number one cause of death for children in America isn't disease. It's not car crashes. It's not drowning. It's guns. Let that sink in. We are the richest country on earth. We've basically turned childhood into a combat sport. Rand analyzed decades of gun policies. They ran the numbers, they ran the models. They asked every question except, do you even lift, bro? And their conclusion was brutally simple. Universal background checks reduce homicides. Safe storage laws reduce injuries. ERPOs reduce suicides. This isn't theory. This isn't emotion. This is evidence. Ghost guns went from novelty items to the preferred weapon of criminals, extremists, and teenagers who think rules are optional and safety is a theoretical concept like the tooth fairy. We're not just seeing rage online, we're seeing it real world. Attempted kidnappings, politicians shot at, election workers harassed, and extremists showing up armed to the teeth to intimidate people exercising their rights. This isn't politics, it's terror with a Facebook RSVP. Okay, now we get to how we got here. Because this mess did not just appear out of nowhere. We built it piece by piece, law by law, grift by grift, like a patriotic Rube Goldberg machine, where the end result is a headline that starts with, another community is grieving tonight. Let's start with the gun law. The folks who looked at firearms and said, what if this was less of a tool, more of a subscription service for politicians? Once upon a time, the NRA did things like gun safety and marksmanship. You know, wholesome stuff. Grandpa teaching you to shoot a tin can off a fence post. Now, they're basically a political action committee with a shooting range in the lobby. Here's how it works, and see if this sounds even remotely sane. A gun lobby gives a politician money. That politician promises to oppose literally any gun safety law, no matter how mild. The lobby group gives them a rating. A plus if you're a good little puppet. F if you accidentally say background checks might be okay in public. Then the politician uses that grade in campaign ads, as if it's the moral credential instead of a Yelp review from the people profiting off gun sales. Nothing weird here, right? Totally normal democracy. And when something horrific happens, school shooting, a supermarket shooting, a church shooting, politicians who are neck deep in gun lobby money hit send on their thoughts and prayers tweet. No policy, no action, just a Hallmark card and promise to do absolutely nothing that might upset the donor spreadsheet. Next up, culture wars. Because if you want to sell a ton of something, you don't just market it as a product, you sell it as identity. We didn't stop at guns are for hunting. We've upgraded to guns are who you are. Now we've got good guys versus bad guys, real Americans versus sheeple, patriots versus traitors. We turned a hunk of metal into a litmus test for whether you love your country. Do you have any idea how stupid that is? Imagine if we did that with, I don't know, oh, you only own one toaster? Wow, I guess you just hate breakfast and America. So the culture war playbook is simple. Tell people the government is coming to take their guns. Tell them their neighbors are dangerous. Tell them society is collapsing. Then say, but don't worry, for only $799 plus tax, this AR-15 can fill the gaping hole where your sense of safety used to be. The result? We don't just own guns for protection anymore. We own guns for validation, for ego, for status. Some people collect sneakers. Some collect Funko Pops. Americans collect firearms like they're Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all, including the one you absolutely do not need. Then there's the media. And when I say media, I mean all of it: TV, cable, social, clickbait news sites that look like they were built on Nintendo DS. We know from research, from experts, from basic common sense that saturating coverage of mass shooters inspires more mass shooters. But the incentives are all wrong. A shooting happens, it's breaking news. Viewership spikes, ad revenue goes up, politicians start yelling on TV. Everyone picks a side, nothing changes. Reset the clock. It's like watching the same terrible episode over and over, but the only thing that gets canceled are people's lives, not the show. We never shut up about the shooter, their name, their childhood, their manifesto, their high school, their favorite band, their internet history. They become infamous, recognizable, a twisted role model for the next deeply broken person who wants to be known for something, even if that something is pure horror. Meanwhile, the victims become a graphic, a number, a montage over sad piano music. And that's it. The message we send without ever saying it out loud is, if you do something monstrous enough, we will put your name in lights. How's that for ridiculous? We've basically turned public safety into an accidental marketing campaign for the worst people alive. Then there's the good guy with the gun myth. Maybe the most American story we've ever told ourselves. The fantasy goes like this: you're at the grocery store. Bad guy pulls out a gun. You, a noble armed citizen, draw your weapon. Deliver a perfectly placed shot under pressure. Neutralize the threat, and then the credits roll while everyone claps and the store gives you a free rotisserie chickens for life. Here in reality, people panic. Adrenaline surges. Targets move. Bystanders are everywhere. Visibility is bad. Cops show up and can't tell who's who. In the chaos, more guns don't necessarily add more safety. They add more gunfire, more confusion, more bodies. And again, ridiculous logic check here. We built an entire system around hoping there's a highly trained, calm, accurate, heroic marksman randomly present at the moment something awful happens, instead of preventing the awful thing from happening in the first place. It's like saying we don't need fire codes. We'll just count on a random guy in an aisle 3 having a fire extinguisher and Navy training. Lastly, let's talk about our political leadership. The people whose job description is literally solve problems and who instead specialize in narrating problems on the cable news. Most Americans, gun owners included, support universal background checks, keeping guns away from domestic abusers, safe storage, stopping people with obvious violent red flags from stockpiling weapons. These are not fringe ideas. These are not radical. This is, hey, maybe let's not hand grenades to a known arsonist. But because some politicians are terrified of losing an A rating from gun groups or a donation, or getting yelled at by 6 guys on Facebook with American flag profile pics, they freeze. They do nothing. Worse than nothing, they perform outrage at anyone who suggests doing something. So we have lobbyists who profit off fear, media that profits off tragedy, extremists who feed off attention, politicians who feed off donations, citizens trying not to get shot buying cereal. And then we pretend this is all just a natural, unavoidable state of being, like gravity or humidity, instead of insanely preventable, meticulously constructed disaster that it is. That's how we got here, not by accident, not overnight, but by 1,000 ridiculous decisions, compromises, lies, and excuses stacked on top of each other until the most heavily armed citizen population on earth also became one of the least willing to do anything about the consequences. The good news, and there is good news, is that if we built this mess, we can unbuild it. The same way this Rube Goldberg nightmare machine got assembled piece by piece, we can dismantle it piece by piece. We just have to stop pretending it's normal because it's not. It's absurd. It's unnecessary. And it is killing us. All right, we've talked about the disaster. We've talked about the history. We've talked about the ridiculous parade of bad decisions that got us here. Now let's talk solutions, real ones, not fantasy movie solutions, not good guy with a gun comic book solutions, not let's arm teachers solutions, not whatever fever dream solution comes out of the comment section of a Facebook ad for tactical cargo pants. Actual, evidence based, constitutionally sound, non insane solutions that already work in the real world. Hit the brakes before the crash happens. Let's start with ERPOs, or red flag laws, which are probably the closest thing we have to common sense that America hasn't wrapped in conspiracy theories yet. Here's the concept: if someone is spiraling, making violent threats, stockpiling weapons, posting edgy manifestos, or doing anything that makes grandma clutch her pearls, you can temporarily remove their access to firearms. Not forever, not confiscation, not the boogeyman's fantasy of government goons kicking down your door, just a pause button. We already do this with driver's licenses, restraining orders, mental health holds, explosives, commercial trucking, pilot certifications. But somehow, the moment you apply it to firearms, like people act like we're reenacting 1776. Let me be clear: ERPOs save lives, tons of lives. Suicides prevented, mass shootings stopped, domestic violence escalations halted. States like Connecticut and Indiana, yes, Indiana, have ERPO style laws for years. And fun fact, gun owners overwhelmingly support ERPOs because even the most Second Amendment loving folks know that sometimes Cousin Larry needs a timeout. Maybe check who's buying the deadly weapon. Here's a wild idea: if you're buying a tool designed to kill something, maybe someone should check if you're legally allowed to have it. We background check car rentals, mortgage loans, fishing licenses, some fireworks, adopting a cat, joining a gym, but guns? Nah, we're chill. Universal background checks are supported by 90% of Americans, including gun owners, cops, veterans, teachers, and probably your dog. But Congress? Congress treats background checks like they're asking lawmakers to donate a kidney. Let me be crystal clear: background checks don't stop law abiding citizens from buying guns. They stop criminals, domestic abusers, fugitives, and people with violent restraining orders. That's it. That's all. The idea that background checks are tyranny is the legislative equivalent of screaming at a lifeguard for telling you not to poop in the pool. Your gun is not a Roomba. Safe storage is probably the lowest hanging fruit in the entire orchard. All it means is lock up your guns, especially around kids, especially around teenagers, especially around anyone going through a mental health crisis, especially around burglars who absolutely love stealing unlocked guns. That's it. We're not asking you to hire a vault tech from the Federal Reserve. There are biometric safes that open faster than your iPhone. There are cable locks that come free with guns. There are storage options that cost less than a gas station snack run. And safe storage stops accidental child shooting, teen suicides, domestic disputes turning deadly, guns stolen from cars, guns stolen from homes, guns being trafficked into crimes. Imagine preventing thousands of tragedies with one simple step. It's almost too practical for Congress to comprehend. Danger doesn't vote. Stop pretending it does. In America, we've politicized threat assessment to the point where your risk level depends more on your bumper stickers than your behavior. That's insane. Threat assessment should be standardized, evidence based, behavior focused, data driven, neutral, not which cable news channel does he watch or what color is her yard sign. We know the signs of escalating violence: fixation on weapons, threats, stalking, manifestos, erratic behavior, social withdrawal, leaking, intent. But instead of treating these like warning lights, we treat them like political Rorschach tests. We need threat assessment teams that work across law enforcement, mental health, and community systems, not based on political vibes, but actual risk. Because dangerous people don't come in red or blue, they come in unstable. If he can't legally touch you, he shouldn't legally touch a gun. America has a loophole so dumb it sounds made up. If you are married and abusive, you're banned from owning guns. If you are divorced and abusive, you're banned. If you casually dated and abusive, open carry, baby. This is called the boyfriend loophole. Yes, it's real. And yes, it's absurd. Closing it would save hundreds of women every year, but apparently protecting victims is controversial, while arming known domestic abusers is, fine. If it quacks like a machine guns are illegal. Everyone agrees on that. But then the industry invented a bunch of accessories that turned semi automatic rifles into machine gun adjacent chaos sticks, bump stocks, binary triggers, forced reset triggers. These things exist for one purpose: to fire very, very fast. There's no self defense scenario where you need to unleash 100+ rounds unless you're defending your home from a zombie horde. Why is buying a gun easier than buying Sudafed? At most gun shows, you can buy a firearm from an unlicensed seller with no background check, no paperwork, no questions asked. I can't buy cough syrup without showing ID and signing a log, but I can buy a rifle with less friction than ordering a pizza? This is not freedom. It's a clearance event. Let researchers do their jobs. For years, Congress blocked the ATF from compiling gun trace data. Why? Because facts hurt feelings, particularly corporate ones. If we want to understand trafficking patterns, we need data. If we want to shut down bad dealers, we need data. If we want to stop gun crimes, we need data. This isn't controversial everywhere else on earth, just here. If you sell irresponsibly, you should be liable. Most gun stores are responsible, but a handful are absolute disaster factories. Some shops have hundreds of guns traced to crimes. Hundreds. How is that even possible? Simple. They sell to straw buyers. They look the other way. They don't keep proper logs. They don't vet anything. Holding negligent dealers accountable would choke off massive illegal pipelines. A healthy gun culture looks like this: safety training, storage education, respect for firearms, community norms, prevention programs, accountability, peer pressure against reckless behavior. Guns aren't toys, they aren't accessories, they aren't personality traits. They're tools, they're weapons. They require responsibility. We can protect rights and protect people at the same time. That's not anti gun, that's pro sanity. None of these reforms are radical. None of these violate the Constitution. None of these disarm responsible gun owners. They are the minimum, the common sense that, hey, maybe don't set the kitchen on fire level of public safety. And the only reason we're not doing them already is because politicians would rather lose 40,000 American lives a year than lose one donor. All right, we've laughed, we've groaned, we've stared into the abyss together. Now let's do something, because doom without direction is just depression with a soundtrack. Tonight's call to action is intentionally simple, specific, and achievable. Support extreme risk protection orders in your state, ERPOs, red flag laws, whatever your state calls them. Support them. Why? Because they work, because they save lives, because every expert from psychologists to cops to veterans to judges say they are one of the best tools we have, and because they are constitutional as hell. Here's what ERPOs do. If someone is spiraling, making threats, talking about violence, posting concerning stuff online, having a mental crisis, or exhibiting dangerous behavior, their family or law enforcement can petition a court to temporarily remove firearms before something terrible happens. Temporarily. Not forever, not confiscation, not the government black helicopter invasion that Facebook uncles warn you about. Just a timeout. It is literally the least traumatic, most common sense, most life saving, least political thing you can advocate for. This is not left or right. This is life or death. This isn't some partisan fever dream. ERPOs are supported by gun owners, Republicans, Democrats, independents, veterans, mental health professionals, law enforcement, judges, domestic violence advocates, public health experts, basically everyone except maybe the guy who thinks the moon landing was filmed at a Costco parking lot. And if you want to do something very specific, send one message to your lawmakers. Just one, not a thread, not a manifesto, not a 42 paragraph essay about your childhood. Just, hi, I am a constituent. I support ERPO laws. Please vote for them. That's the whole thing. You'd be surprised how few people actually contact their lawmaker. I'm talking dramatically few, embarrassingly few. When 10 people contact a legislator, that's a wave. When 50 contact a legislator, that's a mandate. When 100 people contact a legislator, that's a panic attack in khakis. And when those messages all say the same thing, it moves the needle. If your state already has ERPO laws in place, your action is just as important. Tell your legislators to expand, strengthen, and properly fund them. Ask for more training, more community outreach, integration with mental health services, better court access, more resources for local law enforcement, because laws don't work if people don't know they exist or can't easily use them. And one more tiny thing, please, for the love of your blood pressure, do not go argue with strangers on Facebook about this episode. That's not activism. That's self harm. Instead, share this episode with people you trust, your group chats, your friends, your coworkers, your family members who won't disown you for sending them something political. You never know who needs to hear this. You never know who's on the fence. You never know who might send that one message that changes everything. At the core of this episode, at the core of this entire topic, something very simple. We all deserve to feel safe. We all deserve to go home. We all deserve to live in a country where freedom doesn't require a hiding place. ERPOs won't fix everything, but they fix something. Something big, something real, something now. So send that message. Spend the 60 seconds. Be part of the reason we move this country forward. That's the action. That's the ask. That's how we hold them accountable. All right. So we walk through the history. We've shown how absurd the current situation is. We've laid out a solution that works. We've looked at the data, the politics, the culture wars, the fear, the chaos, all of it. Now it's time for my favorite part of every episode, hold them or fold them. The segment where we cut the polite crap, look our leaders dead in the legislative soul, and ask, are you here to protect people or protect your political career? No hiding. No, but the voters in my district. No, but the lobbyists said, just truth. Let's do this. If you are a politician who sends the same recycled thoughts and prayers tweet after every mass shooting, fold them. If you hit copy paste on that tweet faster than you hit the vote button on literally any policy that might reduce gun violence, fold them. If you have the emotional range to say tragedy, but not the political courage to say universal background checks, fold, fold, fold. If you take the gun lobby money like it's a second salary and then pretend you're defending the Constitution, fold them. If your entire public safety plan is do nothing, blame mental health, and cash the check, fold them. If you post pictures of yourself holding rifles like you're on a cover of a low-budget action movie and then accuse other people of politicizing guns, fold them. If you need a check from the NRA to tell you how to vote, you are not a leader. You are a prepaid card. If your campaign ads show more guns than ideas, fold them. If you tell voters that any form of gun safety is a first step toward tyranny, but you're totally fine with corporations tracking their every move through apps, fold them. If you talk tough about protecting families, but block every law that would actually protect a family from gun violence, fold them. And if you use fear to sell policy instead of policy to reduce fear, fold them. If your entire solution to gun violence is the comic book fantasy that every American is a Navy SEAL in waiting, ready to draw, aim, and neutralize a shooter in a Walmart snack aisle, fold them. You're not writing public policy. You're writing Marvel fan fiction. If your plan hinges on heroism rather than prevention, fold them. If you refuse to look at the data, refuse to look at the deaths, refuse to look at the science, refuse to look at the experts, and instead you look directly into a camera and say, there is nothing we can do, fold them all. Because if nothing we can do is your governing philosophy, why you are in office, why are you cashing the taxpayer-funded paycheck? Why did you run? Why did you ask people to trust you with their safety? Step aside, make room for someone who actually wants to solve something. And if you blame video games, rap music, mental health, school doors, the alignment of Mercury, anything except for guns, for gun deaths, fold them. Because you are not diagnosing the problem, you're avoiding it. And now, just to prove this isn't just all doom and snark, let's talk about the people who deserve the other half of the segment. If you are a lawmaker who supports ERPOs, supports universal background checks, supports safe storage, supports closing loopholes, supports depoliticized threat assessments, supports funding for community violence prevention, supports holding negligent dealers accountable, and actually votes accordingly, hold them. If you speak out even when it's unpopular, hold them. If you stand up to lobbyists, hold them. If you choose public safety over political safety, hold them. And especially if you are the rare politician who responds to a shooting with a policy proposal instead of a prayer emoji, hold them. And finally, this part's important. You are in the segment. If you vote based on data, not memes, hold them. If you show up for local elections, hold them. If you contact lawmakers, hold them. If you are doing the work to make your community safer, hold them. But, and this is big, if you sit out elections, if you shrug your shoulders because it's overwhelming, if you stay silent when things get dangerous, then respectfully fold them. Not because you're bad, but because democracy doesn't work without participants. So here's the bottom line. If you fight for safety, lives, and accountability, hold them. But if you fight for donors, culture war points, and online applause, fold them. If you stand for families, hold them. If you stand in the way, fold them. If you stand with the people, hold them. If you stand with the gun lobby, fold them. Because at the end of the day, this country doesn't need perfect leaders. We need courageous ones. So that's where we stand. That's the line in the sand. That's the fork in the road. Hold them or fold them. Accountability is not complicated. It's just uncomfortable for the people who benefit from doing nothing. But this episode isn't just about politicians. It's about us. It's about what kind of country we want to be. It's about what kind of future we're handing to our kids, to our community, to the next generation of Americans who shouldn't have to grow up learning active shooter drills before they learn cursive. So let's shift to the last part of tonight's show, the closing monologue, the real heart of this conversation, the part where we stop laughing through the pain, actually talk about the future we deserve. Here's the thing. No one wants to say out loud. America has been living with gun violence so long, we started acting like it's natural, like it's the weather, chance of storms, chance of shootings, just another Tuesday. But gun violence is not weather. It is not an act of God. It is human-made problem with human-made solutions. We built this reality, and because we built it, we can unbuild it. Somewhere along the way, we confused fear with freedom. We convinced ourselves that the only way to feel safe was to live in a country where everyone is armed because we are afraid that everyone is armed. That's not liberty. That's a feedback loop. That's a snake eating its own tail. That's a society duct taping the cracks in its foundation and calling it renovation. Real freedom isn't being scared in a grocery store. Real freedom isn't planning escape routes in movie theaters. Real freedom isn't sending your kid to kindergarten and hoping today is not the day your town trends on Twitter. It doesn't matter if you are a Democrat, a Republican, independent, libertarian, or politically allergic. We all want to go home at the end of the day. We all want our kids to be safe at school. We all want our communities to thrive. We all want a country where public spaces are for the public, not for panic. That's the one thing about America. We have done impossible things before. We built rockets that touched the moon. We built highways that stretched across the continent. We built movements that shattered ceilings and systems. We built cures, technologies, bridges, and rights. We are not too stupid or too divided or too broken to fix gun violence. We've just been told for decades that we can't. The biggest lie in American politics is this: nothing will change. That lie is convenient. It protects the powerful. It silences the grieving. It convinces good people to give up before they even try. But the truth, everything changes when people demand it. Everything changes when voters refuse to look away. Everything changes when courage outweighs convenience. Gun violence isn't just a political issue, it's a moral issue, it's a community issue, it's a humanity issue. And accountability doesn't start in Washington, it starts with us, with the conversations we are willing to have, with the pressure we are willing to apply, with the courage we are willing to show. Not because it's easy, not because it's fun, but because it's necessary. Liberty with a crosshair isn't liberty. Freedom with fear isn't freedom. And society held hostage by inaction is not the society the founders imagined. No matter how many times people cosplay the founders on Facebook, we stand at a crossroads, two paths. One leads to more of the same: the endless cycle, the heartbreak, the funerals, the headlines, the numbness. The other leads to something better, safer, saner, kinder, more human. A country where rights and responsibility live in the same room. A country where we disagree without destruction. A country where accountability isn't an insult, it is the expectation. We built that country together, not with fear, not with outrage, not with cynicism, but with action, with compassion, with truth, with courage. And trust me, as a retired Marine, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is doing the right thing despite the fear. And we need a whole lot more of that. So tonight, as we close out this episode, hold them accountable. Every last one of them: the lawmakers, the lobbyists, the leaders, the institutions, and yes, ourselves. Because the future isn't written yet. We're writing it right now. And I want the next generation, to my kids, your kids, every kid in this country, to inherit a nation where freedom means possibility, not paranoia. Nation where we don't have to choose between liberty and safety. Nation where both are the standard. That is the country we deserve. That is the country we can build. That is the country we are going to fight for together. Good night.